So I'm excited. Right now, there's two things in my life that I'm looking forward to in the gaming sphere, and it's Ashes of Creation and Dune Awakening. And since we know that Dune Awakening is probably going to come, and Star Citizen, I guess. Three things, two of which will come out.
No. Star Citizen,
but on that note, though,
it's coming. Trust me. It's
you believe
20 years from now, it's coming.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee Break, your favorite podcast for all things gaming, media, tech, fandoms, and more. Today, we'll be continuing our discussion from last episode's Dune topic, but changing our focus from the movie to gaming and the upcoming Dune Awakening MMORPG. Joining me, as always, is my co-host and colleague in coffee, Marcos. So, are you on the hype train for this thing?
I have not been more excited for an MMO in a long time.
I'm glad to hear that that's where you're coming at it from, because every single person that I've talked to, and those of you who are watching the podcast at home, the Coffee Break podcast started off as an MMORPG podcast. Marcos and I actually met in an MMORPG. We're big fans of the genre. Very excited to see where that's going to go. But every single person in our gaming sphere that I've brought this up to, I have been met with nothing but hesitance and apprehension because of the environment in which we find ourselves in with this particular genre. I think most people are just really scared to get excited about anything that's coming out in that vein at this point. So I think it's really smart that they've been doing what they've been doing, not only connecting as closely with the movies as possible, which is incredible. It says a lot about the company.
And a big part of why I'm excited about it. Because
yes, it's a huge part of why I'm excited about it too. But also letting us know, letting us see the behind the scenes, these sort of videos that they're putting out. The production value is incredibly good in these behind the scenes videos, in these interviews that they were doing. The interviewer was quite good, by the way. She was even dressed like a Fremen. All of it looked high quality. You could just tell that it's funded well.
Sick
yeah,
too.
The set was phenomenal. All of the cinematic showcasing of what they did, and they launched it at the same time with their first gameplay trailer, which was stunning.
Yes, it absolutely was. You know, this reminds me of early Guild Wars 2 in some ways. And you remember those amazing trailers, those amazing interviews that they did? The painterly art style as they cut between different scenes.
It was such a cohesive stylistic style. Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Yes. It reminds me of that. Obviously, totally different style, but the feeling that I'm getting, the build up, the way that they're putting care into every little detail as they're going forward. That was Guild Wars 2 when they were building up for the launch.
I was on that hype train. I really was. I was watching every video as it came out. I was on that forum every single day, counting down for the head start for the game and pre-order release. It was so exciting, and they managed to do that with their media alone, because I was not a Guild Wars 1 player. Yeah. This was not something I was grandfathered into. I was convinced based on the release schedule and the production value of their releases that led me to it. And that's what we're seeing here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I've same experience with Guild Wars 1 or Guild Wars 2. I didn't play Guild Wars 1. So this is exactly what we're seeing here. And I'm super excited. I will say I am nervous as well. I'm more excited than I am nervous. And it's mostly because the MMO landscape has become so barren with new releases. Obviously, we still have the old school. We have WoW is still running strong.
WoW, Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls, Guild Wars, old school RuneScape.
Yeah. Final Fantasy has somehow done the impossible and turned itself into a legend in the MMO and the gaming industry for reviving itself.
There's an entire documentary on that, by the way, which is well worth watching. It is an incredible story. If you guys don't know how Final Fantasy XIV, the MMORPG, failed miserably and reconstructed itself completely in the midst of its release cycle as The Realm Reborn, and then became one of the most successful MMORPGs of all time, it is a landmark occasion, and it is an incredible story.
And I would say Guild Wars 2 is still going and successful. So we still have all these MMOs that are running and successful and providing the landscape, but they have existed forever. Go look. Guild Wars 2 is old. It's so old. EVE Online is so old. It's older than WoW. WoW is old. All these MMOs.
By the way, at the time of recording, I think it was 3 days ago, EverQuest celebrated its 25th anniversary, and it's still making expansions.
The MMO space, more than any other space, more than ARPGs, more than shooters are doing fine, but more than every other,
that's true.
More than every other gaming genre. RTSs are one that are kind of crying out for.
That's another one that's dying. It's even worse.
They have Dune, the new Dune one though right now, and there's more coming. Homeworld 3 is coming out.
Yeah, but the genre has become esoteric. It's no longer appealing to new fans. It is basically just like this old guard, and arguably the same thing that's happening with MMORPGs. It's exactly the same line I would draw. I would say that it has become stagnant and we're just not getting... I mean, I remember playing MMORPGs and complaining wildly that I was old and there was all these obnoxious children running around in my MMORPG. That is gone. There's no kids.
Okay.
It's just a whole different thing.
I agree, but I disagree why. I think RTSs are fading out, getting stuck in this like esoteric old guard situation because of the style of game. RTSs require a certain level of coherence, intelligence, dedication. You have to work hard to be good at those games.
That's true.
It's rare that someone is naturally good at it. And MMO, people can just jump in and have fun.
Oh, wait, can I draw an equivalent?
Sure.
Because exactly what you just said is exactly what's happening with fighting games. Fighting games is following the same exact track as RTSs, where it is the barrier to entry into that genre is so high. Like you go to these tournaments, you see these people, there are so few people playing them, and it is just too difficult to get a new fan base into it. They're fighting it, and they're trying harder than the RTS sphere is, and there's even a new fighting game coming up.
The last hope for the fighting game genre is the Riot fighting game. I'm just going to say that because that is being made by, they bought the studio.
2XKO, I think they finally named it.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah, it was Project L. It is now 2XKO. That's the name we were waiting all this time for.
2XKO? I don't know if I like
I've been calling it Tukesco in Rebellion.
So the fighting game industry, we'll get off this tangent in a second, but the fighting game industry to me relies on Tukesco because I don't know what other fighting games are coming, but the Riot fighting game is being made by the studio. They bought the studio that made Rising Thunder, and Rising Thunder's ethos is one of my favorite fighting games. I'm not a big fighting game fan, but I don't dislike them. I just never really got into them. Like Smash Bros. And Rising Thunder were the only ones I really ever got into it at all. But Rising Thunder, its whole ethos was easy to learn, hard to master. It had super complex, deep mechanics that were nested within very simple, straightforward combos, very simple, straightforward movement to understand, mechanics to understand. So it was this simplicity, or it was complexity nested, surrounded by simplicity. And it was such a joy to play. I loved playing it. I was actually able to get good relatively quickly until you run into the really good people and then you realize, oh, there's more to this game.
That reminds me of StarCraft, actually.
Yeah.
That was my experience in StarCraft.
But yeah. I mean, it's my experience in every game when you reach the I mean, for people that don't know, at one point I played a game called Blacklight, Tango Down, and then Retribution. I played those professionally for a little bit, and it is so funny when you get to the upper echelons where you realize you're really good. You are like in the top 10%. I was probably in like the top, because it was such a small game, I was probably in like the top 20 or 25 of players in the game. But that top 5%, that top 1%, they are so good.
Untouchable, a
whole nother level, and it just blows your mind. I mean, that happens with all these games on a bigger scale. I mean, fighting games, that top percent, they're so good, and it that trickle down. I think it's a trickle down effect, like you said, where you realize I'm just never going to be this good, and you just kind of, it wanes on people's interest, and it falls all the way down to the newbie who's like, I'm playing against this guy who's like, he's like a god. Like, why am I playing this game? I'm going to go play, COD.
Yeah, and unlike COD or some other game genres, there's no way around your direct comparison with the one-on-one fighter that you have to contend with. So there's no other way to enjoy the game. It is a dueling game in a one-on-one. In Smash, if you're playing a 4-player game, you can still have fun if you're not as good as everybody else, because there's a lot of other things to focus on. In a fighting game, it is a direct comparison of your skill versus someone else, and it can be really disheartening if you just can't surmount that barrier in the beginning.
Absolutely. And I think, to capstone my point, I think the Riot fighting game, if they inherit that same mentality of complexity, of detail and difficulty nested within simplicity, with an easy to approach nature, that will, I think, reopen the floodgates again for fighting games. Because Riot is so popular, because League of Legends is so popular, that world is so popular, I think it could reopen the floodgates.
It's going to get a new audience.
Yes.
It's going to be the first game to get a new audience. Now, how they handle that audience, how successfully they handle that audience, is going to be the deciding factor. But the factor of it getting a new audience to an old genre is kind of a huge deal by itself. And you're right. And speaking of things that are esoteric, I'm about to get a little esoteric here. If you don't understand fighting games, you don't know that realm at all, this won't make any sense, and I apologize. But Street Fighter 6 actually sort of championed a brand new fighting system. Instead of classic controls where you have to input a certain thing to do a fireball or whatever, they have added with Street Fighter 6 for the first time ever a new system that you can choose instead of classic, which is called modern. And modern is press a button, do an ability. And it is nuanced in slightly different ways, but it makes input much, much easier. So then it becomes, I'm getting over the hurdle of input immediately, and then it's just about strategy. And it has really shaken up the fighting game scene dramatically. And I recently heard that Project L2XKO is implementing that system. And it is the absolute best possible move that they could do when they're getting this sort of holy grail of a new infusion of players to their genre.
So my question with that is, there still does that cap the skill? Or if you ditch those press to do a skill thing or press to do a combo and you go into actually learning the combos, are the combos still better? Like, will you be a better player if you learn the combos?
It's a really good question. And again, it becomes even more nuanced. But the combos are you still need to input the combos, but the actual performance of a specific ability, rotate from back to down to forward and press punch, whatever that is, that input itself is the thing that's being bypassed. But yes, as it turns out, there are certain combos, certain things that will not be possible, at least in Street Fighter 6, based on you using modern controls.
Okay, this sounds so similar to Rising Thunder. As you're describing it, I feel like maybe Street Fighter stole some things from Rising Thunder.
And we're glad of that. One of the things that Marcos and I talk about frequently is games making conscious errors when the problem has been solved by another game. I think that this entire concept of one game stealing from another game is laughable.
Yes.
We, the gamer, are the beneficiary of the theft. We should never complain about that ever. Another game can only get better by taking things that have already been designed to work. And it happens in MMORPGs all the time. We're going to see it in Dune Awakening. To bring us back to Dune Awakening, we are going to make that same comparison like we do in every new addition to the genre. When we go into a new MMO, how are they going to handle these things that we've seen done 1,000 times? And if you find an error that is really bad and you go, it was so much better in blah, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, whatever it is, then it's just even more frustrating. I'm like, please, everyone meet together. Steal all the best things. Don't add something unless it is, don't redo something that is already fixed, Don't break something. Only add something new if it is a benefit to the game.
We call it the MMO Summit, where we get all the MMO designers together and we say, this is how you have to design an MMO. When you're going to design your MMO, you can do whatever you want except these tenets that you have to follow. And we're going to write them all out. And
Oh my gosh, the MMO Summit, we've talked about this for forever. They all need to sit in a room and go, okay, we're going to go over things one by one. Character creation, naming, combat, gearing, whatever it is. Let's talk about each one. Who had the best one? Let's steal yours. That's how this should be done.
It really should. It really should. I love innovation, but we need to start with because a lot of these games, all these MMOs, we're going backwards
Indeed.
in design choices. So it's not that I'm trying to stifle innovation for, you can do your character creation this way, or you can do your end game this way, or, your housing design, XYZ. That's totally fine. I'm all for innovation. Innovation is what drives us forward. But we're seeing regression. Yeah. And to prevent regression, we need standards. So you have standards, and then you can innovate on those standards.
Right. You can change this, but you can't have it suck so it goes below this line.
Exactly.
It has to at least be as good as this. And then if you can make it better, great, innovate. But please don't break something that has already been fixed.
Exactly. Yeah. And we see that all the time. And I think that, I guess since we're back on MMOs and Dune Awakening, I think the difference between an MMO and like fighting games and RTSs is that, the outcome is the same, where the genre is languishing and failing, but the reasoning behind it for MMOs is because we just haven't seen that innovation. We're seeing regression and not innovation. Every new MMO that comes out has more regression than innovation, far times more.
Yeah, I agree.
Way more.
Yeah, and we've seen that every time we get, just to give some examples, Lost Ark, New World, like we've seen these things come out and you're like, wait, what are you doing? Are you creating this in a vacuum? Have none of you played an MMORPG before? Like, what's happening?
Even, and I'm probably going to do a whole separate video on this, but even in the ARPG space, Last Epoch, which is a good game. I actually think it's a good game. There are plenty of spots in it that I feel like they have regressed in, just like, if you just played another ARPG, you would have said, this is how we should do it. And you would have implemented it that way.
Yeah. And ARPGs are an interesting sphere to begin with, because that is, like RTS, it is a very confining space. Like, you really only have so much to innovate on. So these real detail-oriented things, systems, the combat, you can make some of the graphics better. You can make the skills flashier. Those things only go so far. That's not really what we're looking for. It's always some sort of innovation on the finite systems that exist in a sphere of an ARPG, and there's not that many. If you took every ARPG ever and put them in a collage, most people would be like, yeah, it's pretty much the same game, right? Like, if you're not an ARPG player, it's going to look the same. And that's because it is the same. Then it really kind of magnifies the innovation or lack thereof, right?
And I would say even more so, because you talk about magnification, even more so than MMOs, the stuff that people want standardized, they clamor for standard. The thing I think that people praise Last Epoch the most for is loot filters. That's literally it. Loot filters. I mean, there's so many other things they do well, but loot filters, something that PoE finally got right? That's one of its things that people say, okay, PoE, you got this right. No other game seems to have this. This is the one of the few things that we can wave as a standard banner. And Last Epoch has it, and I think does it better than PoE, even though my PoE experience is more limited than Last Epoch. But I mean, actually, probably about the same at this point. But they do it better, in my opinion. And I think that's one of the things that people are championing. Like, this should be the standard from here on out. And I don't understand why MMOs, I mean, our ARPGs need to pick up the standards too, but I don't understand why MMOs refuse to standardize certain things when they know it's working well in another MMO. And I think that's the big hurdle for new MMOs coming up. And we really need, the MMO genre, in my opinion, is not in danger of dying, but it's in danger of going from a primary genre like FPSs to becoming a minor genre like fighting games and RTSs, who both used to be primary genres.
I agree. Yep.
But they are now minor genres, and MMOs are going to become a minor genre, and not because the audience is changed and the way we experience games and the culture is changed. No, instead of stuff that is kind of obviously RTSs and fighting games have made mistakes, and we've talked about things they can do to rectify those mistakes, but MMOs are going to get to that minor genre purely through mistakes, nothing else. It is not a big culture shift. I mean, there's been minor culture shifts and stuff like that, but the primary reason they're going to become a minor genre is because they keep making the same mistakes over and over and over.
Each one just kind of digs the hole deeper and deeper because of how hard it is to make an MMORPG. To make an ARPG or a fighting game can be a loss, but it's not the greatest loss in the world. An MMORPG is a magnitude of a bigger gamble than either of those other two genres, right? So like, new companies are really hesitant to enter into this sphere because it is years of production, an enormous team, a huge commitment, right, to continual content. This is a very scary genre to enter, and when you watch bad additions happen over and over again and giant companies losing enormous amounts of money again and again, it becomes a dangerous thing that a lot of people don't want to touch. And it does become very scary. And I agree with you. I think that the standard is very relatable for most of these MMORPGs. But to bring it back to Dune Awakening again, one of the things that is really going to set this apart, right? Because we want to make these comparisons, these direct comparisons. But one of the evolutions, I think, of gaming today, and for anyone who is aware of the content creator Lazy Peon, who does a great deal of content in regards to MMORPGs, he's probably the content creator authority on this, so to speak. If you're into the genre, you probably know who he is. He has made comments to what he wants to see the genre do and how to appeal to modern audiences. And a lot of MMORPGs, as stagnant and old as they are, don't appeal to modern audiences in the same way. And I think one of the elements that's going to make Dune Awakening interesting is that it's an open world, persistent atmosphere that we're going to be playing in, just like in any other MMORPG, but we're entering a slightly different sphere here. This is a game that is not going to be just an MMO, but it's going to be a building simulator, a survival game, an open world PvP competitive environment. I mean, we don't even have a ton of comparisons for this segue of the genre.
The best comparison would be what New World was supposed to be. Do you remember that original concept?
I do, yes.
We had got a sneak preview of it in the first alpha beta, that first early play that none of us really played. And then every new iteration became more and more MMO. And I love MMO. And
more
I think,
watered down.
Yeah, and I think it did make the game better in some sense. Like, at some point it became so little about being a survival game that it started improving because it just became more and more MMO. So they bottomed it out and then started bringing the curve back up because it just became more of a generic MMO. Yep. But that bottoming out process sucked, man.
It gutted the game, right? We just got a shadow of what I think it was promising to be. I think, ironically, the only game that we might be able to compare most directly to this game is probably the other game that the studio has made, which is Conan Exiles. I have very little experience with Conan Exiles, except to know that it's following in the same vein, or that rather, I should say, the Dune Awakening is following in its vein, and they're actually taking a lot of the tech from Conan Exiles and bringing it over and improving it here. So this sort of survival elements of the MMO, of the crafting, the building of buildings in MMORPGs. So just to give a better context for what Dune Awakening is, it is an MMORPG. You will be making your own character in the world of Arrakis, in the universe of Dune. You will design it yourself. You will play just that character. It will be a first-person perspective from this one character, not necessarily first person, but you know what I mean, from the perspective of your character. The world is persistent. You will make friends. You will make guilds. You will go out and adventure together. But the elements that are going to be very unique are the survival survival elements. And, you know, I love survival games on the side. I've not seen that really overlap with MMORPGs, so this is going to be very fascinating. But I would say that the universe of Dune, the world of Arrakis, is maybe one of the coolest environments to try this in that I could ever possibly imagine.
Absolutely.
Arrakis is dangerous, right? I mean, that's the first thing. You're like travel in black shade by day or at night because the sun is so oppressive. The heat is so extreme. The need for farming of spice, of trying not to die in the desert, of constantly needing water and moisture. The universe has really fleshed out the requirements of that, what the suits are like, how they get their water. The developers have said you will effectively start in like a safe zone, which is protected among shields, and you're going to be much safer. You can build permanent structures there, separate from anything that might get destroyed by the heat or by sandstorms. And then you will need to go into the desert deeper and deeper to get resources. This is a very crafting heavy game in terms of survival. So you will need to make supplies to go deep into the desert. You'll need to build shelter, travel in shade, or try to travel at night. Be running out of moisture, try to get some from plants. You can't get that much from plants. You'll fight to go deeper and maybe try to get some spice. You'll get jumped by some other players that are vying for that same spice. You'll have to kill them and maybe even convert their blood to water so that you survive the trek back to your base. I mean, the environment for this sort of extreme level of survival in an open world MMO landscape is an exciting one. I mean, this is an automatic departure from almost everything we just said with comparable elements from MMO to MMO. I mean, obviously there will still be skill systems, a leveling system, questing, character development. These things are intrinsic to the genre for sure. And we don't really know exactly how that's going to pan out, but it's going to be in an environment and atmosphere that will define how we experience this new step of MMORPGs. And this is what Lazy Peon had said. He had actually said he wanted to see more action, more conflict, open world PvP, which I know scares a lot of classic MMORPG players, but I think is going to be maybe the single most appealing lead-in for people outside of this very insular player base.
I agree. I think it's definitely going to be, I think it's going to combine, hopefully, if they do it right, it's going to combine the survival game genre and the MMO genre and hopefully bring in the large segments, not everyone, but large segments of both of those populations. And they're two genres that are rife for combination. I mean, we've seen other MMOs combined with other genres to varying levels of success.
Lost Ark being one of the ARPG.
Yep, Lost Ark being one. And I think there are reasons why Lost Ark didn't succeed in the Western genre.
Oh, that was their fault. It's not the mix of the genre that was the problem.
The mix of the genre was the good thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we could see another success here as far as the good, with Dune. And honestly, we talked about Guild Wars 2, kind of harkening back to some of what they've done in their launch and their run up to launching. If the MMO genre is in such a bad state that if Dune, and I hope it releases way better than this, but if it released the way that Guild Wars 2 released, it would be a success, right? Mm-hmm. And so the bar is so low for them that if the game just comes out playable and has things to do to sustain your interest, it really will be good. And yeah, I'm super excited, and I'm really curious how they're going to handle the survival. They talked about, and this will be part of the end game, honestly, is how do they keep the survival element going beyond the initial, because in a survival game, once you get your base set up, you're pretty much good, right? Like it's just basically like, okay, the initial part of surviving is over once you get your base set up and you can replenish resources consistently. And once you replenish resources consistently, you're no longer surviving. Now you're playing an upgrade game, because every new thing that you need to achieve, you have to find, a resource or something to use to upgrade. So then it's just a tic-tac-toe upgrade game, and you're no longer surviving. And they talked about that in the first video that they put out, and they said that they want to expand beyond that in the survival sense for, the game itself, but then also they want to introduce different types of survival, like, political.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think that like, I love that they're attacking it from two angles. Like, we want survival to go beyond set up a base and you're good, because then it's not survival anymore. But then we also want to have different forms of survival, because we know we can't make you survive infinitely. Like, we're going to extend it longer than other games do, but we can't do that forever. We have to introduce other ways to keep the survival elements going, to keep the game interesting beyond just the basics.
It's really true. And there's so many different directions to sort of tackle that in. I think the very element of how intrinsically PvP this is going to add an interesting element just by itself. Because while most survival games are exactly what you said, you get to a point where you're surviving and that's fine. You're no longer in danger, right? It's like the experience you get the very first time you ever played Minecraft, and you're at that first night, right? You're at first night and things are scary.
First time a creeper blows you up.
Yeah. You don't know what's coming. It's dangerous. Did you build enough of a base, you know, like there's these elements. Once you get past that, that sort of drops away and it isn't part of the game. I think in this, when you're vying for these resources with all these other players, it's going to bring in other, we're talking about the sort of crossover of genres, not just the crossover into survival. We're also crossing over into the large scale vehicle based persistent combat zone vying for these resources in a genre akin to maybe PlanetSide or Battlefront. You know, we're combining that in here too. And it's going to be a very interesting, I genuinely think that this is 3 genres meeting in the middle here.
I think there's going to be a looter shooter aspect too, maybe 4 genre, like a Division, a Destiny sort of.
Yes, exactly. And vehicle oriented. I mean, you're going to be crafting to get this stuff. You're going to get vehicles. You're going to be racing. Maybe you're not as built up as this other guild, but you have like a chance to run in and grab these resources quickly before somebody else does. And the way that you can't build that advantage persistently, this is another element that's going to be added to the game. These Coriolis storms, which will come once a week and wipe everything, suddenly destroying like the sandstorms of Dune will destroy the structures that you've made trying to go deeper into the desert. It will destroy them completely. It'll reset the world, bury some areas, uncover ruins in other areas, show some resources that are high value and that people will be racing for. There's a lot of exciting elements to go for. Maybe you get there first, but then the sandworm appears. You know, like there's just so many elements. Or even if you can't handle the other team, but you can sneak in there and set a thumper and then set them up for getting killed by the sandworms. There's just a large scale PvP element here that is going to really shake this up. I think that's going to be hard to predict.
Absolutely. You know, the amount of times that people are going to die, they kill an enemy team, they're looting them, they need their water to turn their blood into water, right? And then another team comes and kills them while they're doing that. That's going to happen so many times.
And then you steal their blood.
Yeah. I'm really excited. I think they're really going in the right direction. And I hope they learn, you know, talk about political survival. I hope they learn a lot from an open world PvP. I hope they learn a lot from EVE Online, because EVE Online personifies open world PvP and personifies, in an MMO sense, I mean, in an MMO sense, it personifies open world PvP and it personifies political survival. Politics is EVE, right? In the regions that players control, where they own territory and they own the structures, and they're the ones that put in all the resources in the building, every single structure that's out there, every single ship that's out there, everything. They built it by hand or they stole it from someone else. That is, politics plays, it's a massive part in that. It's all of that. And if they could incorporate some of those elements into Dune, you know, you talked about structures being wiped away, maybe on the outside of the, you know, where the sandstorm, the Coriolis storm happens and everything inside of it gets wiped out. And I'm sure there's going to be safe zones on the outside where players can build structures to kind of have a base. People fighting over those structures and those staging areas, because they know, oh, the odds of some good resources spawning close to the staging area are maybe a little higher than another staging area. This is a hotbed where we fight, where we have political drama, where people backstab each other, you know, big stuff.
There's limitless expression for how this is going to work. And I like the allusion to EVE, because that's the only other game that I've heard of these sort of political elements playing out. I've not experienced it myself. Talk about the most esoteric of all MMORPGs. I mean, like, if you're not born into that, dude, yeah, you're not getting into that. But just to give some context for everyone else, if you've not heard a ton about Dune Awakening, there's a lot of really cool things. I don't want to scare people away just based on the PvP element. They have promised that you'll be able to play however you would like to. You can just be an architect. You can build instead and sell things on the in-game store, you know, in the trading post, so to speak. You can build a base and then go out into the desert. And instead of having to build it from scratch, you can save a blueprint, which you will then copy that base directly, just putting resources into building it so you don't have the monotony of doing it over and over again. But alternatively, it could be a building game for you where you build up this very, very detailed base. And some of the really exciting things we've been seeing in Unreal 5 that they're using. Lumen is one of the most incredible technologies I've seen in a long time. It's going to shape the lighting in this game in a way that everyone is not prepared for. I promise it's going to be insane. But you can actually build a really detailed, really cool house and then sell that blueprint on the trading post. You can just be an architect. You can be a crafter. You don't have to participate in this PvP if you do not wish to. You could be part of your guild doing other elements on the outside, politics and building, crafting, all of that kind of stuff, and sort of help your guild in that way. I even heard them say that you can even be something like a pilot or a scout, and you can avoid combat, fly around, and make maps of the desert that you can then sell to other players. This is a very exciting thing. There's going to be real vehicle traveling in this, which is very, very exciting. Even the character creation itself, you basically pick a mentor when you first start. It kind of starts you where you are, but there are no classes in the game. You will very organically build how your character and abilities work by questing and meeting people that will train you in certain things, by adding combat prowess or even the ability to use the voice, do some Bene Gesserit stuff. There's also sorts of elements that you can mix and match and build together. One of the most exciting things that I've heard so far is their description that they're calling it, and I think this is hilariously ironic. They're calling it sandbox gameplay.
Oh, dude, you are describing Eve. You are describing Eve Online. Everything you said right here is Eve Online, except in the Dune universe.
Is it really?
Yeah, every single
I don't know
thing.
enough about
Being able to, be a craftsman and not take part in combat, like high sect is a big part of that. Building things, selling things on the market. Eve has a whole trailer called The Butterfly Effect, where they describe what it's like to live in a sandbox where having one action can cause this ripple effect of a chain of millions, of thousands of millions of actions. And like, you're literally describing Eve, and I love it. I'm so hyped.
You hear that, guys? First person Eve, and you can get in on the ground floor instead of the least approachable to new players game on the planet called Eve. So
yeah, and this will be
this is a good opportunity.
Way more approachable. This won't be Spreadsheet Simulator. This is going to be an action game, or this is going to be more of an MMO style survival game, and not Eve is like, there's spaceship combat, and it's a sci-fi setting and all that stuff, but Eve is a lot more calculated. Eve is like,
it's not action oriented.
Yeah, Eve is more of an RTS played in your mind, like in your ship. You click buttons and things happen. It's less of
you're just imagining them happening.
Yeah, it's less of like you don't directly control your ship. Although they did add a change in where you can directly control your ship, but like I don't use WASD to move my ship from one spot to another and increase the throttle and whatever. I click a button that warps me from point A to point B, and then I click a button that approaches the station. It's that kind of game. It's not a...
Yeah, you're not making that sound fun at all.
It is a lot of fun when you get into it. It's the thinking man's MMO. It's not meant for someone, like, it's not a game that, and that's one of the reasons that I finally stopped playing it, is that it's not a game that is meant to sit back and relax and enjoy yourself. It is a game that is meant to make you think, to be constantly, especially if you're in anywhere that isn't, even in high sec these days. High sec is not safe at all anymore, but it is a game that is constantly meant to keep you on your toes, to be worried, to be constantly paying attention to the things around you, and to be, methodical about everything you do. Every decision has a ramification, a ripple effect, a butterfly effect. Mm-hmm. That is the beauty of Eve. But honestly, I think this is why Eve, one of the many reasons why Eve is slowly dying, is that I can't play Eve at all. I don't have the time. It requires an immense amount of time. It requires an immense amount of effort and thought.
Huge commitment.
Yeah, that's just not something that the average adult can commit to. Mm. I think back to when I was a kid, a teenager, and in college playing Eve, when I had the time to play Eve, and I can't imagine some of the adult people that I met, that I became friends with, that were playing Eve. How did they even find the time? They had families and stuff. I don't understand how they found the time. I know I don't have the time now.
Yeah, which brings it back to the point that only adults are playing MMORPGs these days. Yeah. None of these people are kids that have all this time. We are all like, listen, we still play a ton of MMORPGs, and everyone's got kids and families and work, and we're trying to fight schedules, and that's just the way the genre is.
It is the way the genre is, but Eve takes it to a whole nother level, and I'm glad. It seems like Dune Awakening is going to take some of the concepts of Eve and bring it back to the normal MMO scale, which is still a big time commitment, but it's not Eve, which I myself and everyone else that I know calls it a second job, because that's what it is.
Yeah. What's funny is my only exposure to Eve that I've ever had was working at a previous job where the IT guy was Eve obsessed. So he would walk in to fix a computer, to set up a network, to run a cable, whatever it is, while carrying a laptop with him that was Eve. He just would walk around playing Eve all day at the office.
That is Eve. It is your second job.
He tried to get me to play it, man, and I just couldn't. He was like, look at this, because he knew I was into MMORPGs, and he's like, oh man, look at this. This is the coolest thing. And by the time he was done, I was like, thank you for showing me why I should never play Eve.
Yeah,
it's just too much.
It is a lot. I mean, I think I'll have to send you some videos sometime of some of the best Eve moments, the moments that would like totally make you want to play it. Obviously, it's I wouldn't recommend anyone getting into Eve now. As much as I love Eve, I wouldn't recommend you getting into it. And they've even made it. There's a catch-up mechanic. There's catch-up mechanics in Eve now too. So it's more new player friendly than it has ever been.
So they're trying.
Yeah, it's more new player friendly than it's ever been its entire existence. And there's never been a moment in Eve that I have been more reluctant to recommend it to people. But yeah, I'll send you some videos sometime. You'll love it. And I think it'll get you hyped for Dune, because all the videos I'll send you are the kind of things that hopefully you'll be able to do in Dune. The hot drops onto, like surprising people when you don't expect it, and catching them off guard, having this really awesome battle plan that you practiced over and over and over, and then you execute perfectly, and you beat off a larger force that you should have never been able to deal with, but because you've practiced it and you're so proficient at it, you pull off this amazing stuff that no one expected. And the market manipulation and the spying and the political intrigue and the robberies business, the stealing thousands of dollars worth of real life, what would be worth real life money in game by stealing ships and gear and, all this stuff. I expect you to be able to do at least a good portion of that in Dune, because this is all going to be physicalized stuff, right? That tank that you build is going to be sitting in someone's base somewhere because it's going to be a survival game, right?
Correct. Finite resources that you crafted yourself. Yep. Absolutely.
And Eve is the same way. That stuff, when you log off, that stuff is there, right? When you log off, if it's in a station, it's probably safe unless that station gets sieged, which you have, then a couple of days or weeks to get out. But, if you leave it in a pause, if you leave it sitting out in space, if I log off, in space, there's a log off timer. Eventually I'll disappear. But if I'm not in that ship, if I jettison it because I have too many ships, I have 3-4 ships, that ship stays there and someone can scan it down and steal it.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. And that's what I'm hoping.
It sounds not awesome, but it's awesome.
And the money and resources you put into that ship, and when it's gone, it's gone. If it explodes, it's gone, and you have to go build a new one. And in Dune, that's one of the things I'm really excited about. That tank that you build, that ornithopter, ornithopter. I think it's their ornithopters.
Ornithopter.
Yeah. Ornithopter. I like ornithopter. They're ornithopters.
But it's a thopter.
That ornithopter that you built, that cool legendary armor that you stole from someone else or that you looted from beating this big bad worm or whatever boss that you had to fight. When somebody fights you or when they break into your base or whatever, you're going to be paranoid about losing that. You're going to be like, oh my God. And it's going to build the tension and it's going to make these moments really exciting.
Which is going to define the experience slightly away from MMORPGs. I mean, it really is going to be this interesting combination. Do you know, Marcos, what we should do? The two of us should go and play Conan Exiles just for fun.
No.
Try that out and get an idea of where they're coming from. That might actually be like a fascinating thing because they've drawn a lot of connections between the two. They've just ended up improving these systems. One of the things that is still there or is in Conan Exiles is the ability to do this building, this sort of like base building thing. And they were very excited to say that in Conan Exiles, players have built incredible things as they always do. Like someone built the Taj Mahal, but it's just them. And that was what made them think, what would be really awesome is these incredible builds that people do in Minecraft or in Conan Exiles would be to be able to sell the blueprint, to be able to make something cool from that other people can be like, I really want the Taj Mahal, and I can spend a ton of money and get this blueprint. You'll still need the resources, so it doesn't give you an advantage. You don't just get to skip things, but it will make it so that if you don't want to base build, you can still get something cool by gaining money in some other way. Or if you don't want to fight and you really love crafting and base building, there's a room for you to have a very interesting and important experience there. I think that's a cool dynamic.
Absolutely. I think housing systems and base building are like some of the best things that MMOs don't do enough. And I'm super excited it's going to be here in Dune Awakening. And this is what I'm talking about with innovation, right? Like this is innovation. Like they took some elements from Eve, from other games, other survival games, Conan Exiles, other games. And these are the good things that we're taking from these games. And then, because I don't know of a single other game that does that where you can blueprint your entire base building design and then you'll be able to sell that on the market to people. That is awesome. And that's a whole nother avenue now for crafters, for builders. It incentivizes those people to keep making those things because they're making money from selling the, crafting materials and stuff, but then it incentivizes builders to keep building because they can come up with all these cool concepts and then make money from it. When you have this marquee builder, this, I'm trying to think of a famous builder. Who's a famous artist?
Banksy.
No, well, okay. Van Gogh.
The one that wouldn't work. Sorry.
How LA of you, Banksy. But you have this Van Gogh or some amazing architect that I can't think of the name of right
Van
now.
Gogh.
Yeah. Okay, you said it properly. But he's the Van Gogh of this world in Dune Awakening. That person, he or she, can be like, okay, my stuff is the best. People love my stuff. The first couple of ones that I sold cheap, and they just like sold out. People want more and more of them. They want me to keep making more and more of these blueprints. And I hope blueprints are finite as well. Like I hope when you craft a blueprint, it costs resources for you to actually make the blueprint too, because in Eve it does. You can't just make infinite blueprints. It costs resources to make blueprints. So if that's the case, then putting them on the market has more intrinsic value. And then when this person runs out of blueprints, they can realize based off the market and the data, oh, people love my stuff. My blueprints sold out. Maybe I should charge infinite money for them. Maybe I should charge millions.
Yeah, you can make what it boils down to is making a name for yourself in this corner of the game in the way that you want to, and being rewarded for it. And that is so awesome. That's what we want to see in an MMORPG. It has to be choice. The name of the game for any MMO is choice, not just in your character, but the way that you play. Sandbox MMORPGs is a term. It's for finding the things that you like and not being forced to do the things that you don't. And especially in a game where there's going to be such a heavy-handed effect of PvP, of even large-scale scary PvP. The fact that there's going to be other ways to play this game and contribute even into group play, right? With guilds and things, not just having a solo experience, but helping in this other way. Those are the things that are going to make it as broad and wide reaching as we need it to be.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited. Right now, there's two things in my life that I'm looking forward to in the gaming sphere, and it's Ashes of Creation and Dune Awakening. And since
Star
we
Citizen.
know that Dune Awakening is probably going to come, and Star Citizen, I guess. Three things, two of which will come out.
Star Citizen,
but on that note, though,
it's coming. Trust me. It's
you believe
20 years from now, it's coming.
Our kids will play it with us.
They will.
What's very exciting is that I want to end this segment by saying, all right, guys, very excited. We'll see you in Dune Awakening at this time. But despite the fact that they are rapidly moving through their process of betas, they're inviting more people consistently. You can sign up on their website to be added to the list of people to be invited to closed betas. Please do. And to wishlist the game. These are good things for the company to help make it be the best game that it can be. But we don't actually have a date to give you right now. And in fact, they have uttered the words aloud that we all just die to hear these days when we're looking forward to something, which is, it will take as long as it takes. And I could not be more excited to hear that come out of his mouth. I want no pressure on this game to release before it is ready. It is the number one game killer for any new game of any kind, but MMORPG especially. First impressions are always important, but in MMOs, it is dramatic. And these days, the pressure to get the game out quickly, I was extra scared for this game trying to come out very quickly because it wants to capitalize on the success of the concurrent movies. It really would make sense for it to rush itself, but we don't have a date. And I'm happy to say that that's true because we will have years before we get Dune Messiah. There will be yet another chapter of this movie, of this franchise that can then be capitalized on by the game when it comes out as new content if the game does well. And the only way it's going to do well is if it takes its time and makes it all it should be.
What do you think is going to come out first, Dune Messiah or Dune Awakening?
Awakening.
Yeah,
Awakening.
I think so too.
I think we're going to get like 5 years or something for...
Yeah, I think so too.
Maybe 4 years for
Messiah.
for Messiah. Yeah. So in the meantime, we will have Dune Prophecy. That's the TV series we were talking about just a little bit ago. I think I forgot to mention that after all of the trading around of showrunners and directors, it's now a single showrunner of Alison Schopker. She is actually awesome. She's worked on a bunch of cool stuff, including Lost, Alias, Westworld, some very big successful shows. So she is the sole showrunner at this point. It is encouraging. I think it landed on somebody that I think is probably the best of the people they were shopping around. So I am encouraged by this. One of the last things I was going to say about Dune Prophecy that we missed earlier was that there is another potential reason why it may not have gotten a bunch of hype around the time that it did, and it was because it was actually skirting the SAG-AFTRA strike by filming during the SAG-AFTRA strike by utilizing non-union workers and some sort of obscure British loophole thing with the contract. So they basically probably didn't want anyone knowing that they were doing that at all. It was a really tenuous situation at the time when people were trying to do that. So there's been a lot going on behind the scenes of this. I don't know whether or not it's going to be good, but at least we have a lot to look forward to there. Probably Dune Prophecy first, Dune Awakening next, and then finally Dune Messiah. So this is a great time to be a Dune fan. There's so much coming down the pipeline. I'm excited. It's going to be awesome.
And if you're at all interested in playing some Dune content right now, you can play the RTS if you like RTS's Dune Spice Wars. I've been playing it a little bit. It's good. It's got a great tutorial to get you started. Probably the best tutorial I've seen in RTS in a long time. And then you can hop in and play a bunch
and
of
a lot of good
game
DLC recently too.
Yes, yep, some good DLC. It's fun. It's a little slower paced than I think most RTSs people are used to, like StarCraft and stuff, but it kind of fills in the middle between an RTS and some of the like grand strategy games like Stellaris and stuff that I'm used to. So I like it. We'll see if I stick with it long term, but it's filling that kind of Dune, itch for me right now where I hop in, I play for a little bit, and then I'll move on.
I think I might pick it up too.
Oh, you mentioned upcoming MMOs. I agree with your list of Ashes of Creation, Dune Awakening, and then of course Star Citizen, obviously. But one more that I'll add.
Obviously,
come on, let's get it right. One more that I'll add is there is a MMO that has slipped under the radar, and I wouldn't have known about it, but it popped up in one of my feeds and stuff. Ghost is a new MMO by former World of Warcraft and Riot Games. Greg Street, I believe his name. He brought together this, what he calls his like all-star crew of people to build an MMO. People that have worked on every MMO ever, from World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, all over the place. He brought people in, and he is former World of Warcraft lead designer, and I believe he was the lead designer in Riot's upcoming MMO. So he left that project, I guess, a year ago, and has now started this studio. So this is early doors, but if you wanted to like keep the hope train alive, because that's what we've done for the last 20 years.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're best at. The copium.
Yeah, I guess it's Dune Awakening and then Ashes of Creation, and then when those two hopefully don't fail, but if they do fail, Star Citizen and then Ghost. Actually, Ghost will probably be Star Citizen.
Before Star Citizen. You know it's true.
But Ghost and then Star Citizen. I don't know. Squadron 42 is coming out next year, they said. We'll see. They don't have a date to it, but they said next year is what they're hoping for. And then that's the single player of Star Citizen. And then they're releasing this year and in the next month or two, this huge patch that puts in all the groundbreaking tech. They've already, it's not myth. It's in the alpha. It's in the, obviously Star Citizen's an alpha, but there's like an alpha for the alpha. It's in the hidden alpha that only certain people have access to, so not the public alpha, and people have been testing it, and it is working perfectly not perfectly, but like perfectly for an alpha. It's working perfectly for an alpha. The groundbreaking server meshing tech. So it's a real, the tech is real, the game is real, it's not a scam. It's just, are they going to run out of money, and is it going to get done before? Are they ever going to be satisfied with the game before it blows up in their face?
Yep. A lot of games are in that sort of scope at this point.
Yeah, but that's your list. Those are your 4 MMOs to look forward to. I can't think of another one that I would recommend because I think they're all not worth getting hyped over. I mean, I'm going to check them out. Right, we're excited for, or not excited, but we're interested in what's that one that's coming to
Throne of Liberty.
Yeah, I'll check out Throne of Liberty. It looks good, but I've already heard all the problems with it, and we have our issues with Korean MMOs, despite the fact that I like Black Desert Online.
That makes one of us.
But Dune Awakening is the first MMO in the line here that is worth getting hyped for.
Well, I'm on the train.
So see you guys all in Dune Awakening.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, thanks for watching Coffee Break. This episode was brought to you by viewers like you. If you want to support us, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to get all our future content. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, and don't forget to check us out on your favorite podcasting platforms. And we'll see you when we see you.